Welcome on behalf of Pop Culture Classroom.
I'm Eleanor, and I'm just really excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Also with us, we have S.E. Fleener.
Hello, happy to be here.
As well as Matt Slater.
What's up, everybody? I'm the Education Program Manager here at Pop Culture Classroom, and was also the basically assistant for running the Excellence in Graphic Literature Awards this year.
Perfect. And I'm Katharine Scott, and I'm a classroom instructor with Pop Culture Classroom. Just to let everyone know, as we head into our discussion, that if you would like to interact or ask any questions, you can do that in the chat option of wherever you are streaming.
That's right. We would love to have as many questions as possible, so don't feel shy about dropping those questions in the chat.
Perfect. Now I think we can pass it over to Essie to talk a little bit about the Excellence in Graphic Literature Awards.
Absolutely. So the Excellence in Graphic Literature Awards is an awards program tied in with Pop Culture Classroom. We evaluate graphic works, so graphic memoir, fiction, as we're going to be talking about today, and then we choose what works seem to best represent this moment in time and have a really strong educational component or potential. So there are works that we're evaluating on many different levels, from story to the art itself to, again, like I said, its potential use in a classroom setting. And I'm super pumped. I'm a member of the Adult Awards jury, and this is my second year doing it, and it's the best. We get to read awesome books and say, these are awesome books, you should read them. What could be better?
So, Essie, I'm curious, what did you, how was this experience like for you guys, and what did y'all, how did you arrive to naming The Hard Tomorrow as your winner for the adult category?
So thanks for the extra prompt, Matt. I forgot that I thought I was in a different place, but here we are.
Oh no, we're just hanging out here. We're just hanging out, having a good time, and I'm going to ask you some questions and make you think a little bit.
Good, I love it. I'm a podcaster, so I'm like built for this.
That's what we're doing.
The thing that I think The Hard Tomorrow is so incredible at doing, and the reason it was selected, is it's just this seamless marriage of the art and the story, in part because Eleanor Davis, hey Eleanor, is the person who did both. And so I think that lends itself a cohesiveness that was really compelling. Reading all of the books is so incredible, and sometimes you're like, I don't know how to rank this versus this, but then you really think about, in the case of The Hard Tomorrow, what to me really stood out was, where does it fall in like the wider scope of graphic novels and comics as well, because we don't really make a differentiation, right? We're like graphic literature. So if you got pictures, you got words, come to us. And sometimes if you just have pictures, come to us and tell a story. So I think that what The Hard Tomorrow does, that I read a lot of comics, don't see very often, is the depictions of protest and the depictions, frankly, of police violence. And so we see these just incredible panels that show at once the wide hope of activism, the hope of being engaged in a democratic society, juxtaposed with like the harsh realities that change doesn't feel good. And when you're pushing back against some aspects of dominant society that are hurting people's lives, there's conflict there. And at the same time, Eleanor, you're telling this deeply personal story of this one person and what her experience is like as an activist while trying to get pregnant, trying to live off the grid and build her more sustainable life for herself and her future family. And it just brings together so many threads in such a beautiful and compelling story that it was kind of irresistible. We were like, okay, Eleanor, you win. Well, I could do that. This is like I'm like, yes, Eleanor, you're amazing. That's like my bread and butter. I think what I've personally found really compelling was the way that Hannah's allowed, the protagonist Hannah is allowed to be this deeply complex person. You know, she's also a caregiver for Miss Phyllis, an elderly woman who, you know, has an incredible arc over the course of the book as she sort of almost adopts Hannah as like her own grandkid, and, you know, gives her a hard time for her haircut she doesn't like. That's like super, you know, edgy and cool. And it's so, there's so many sweet, intimate moments inside a work that is trying to say something big about how societies do and don't change. And whenever you can juxtapose the interior with such a powerful exterior manifestation, it's like that's what the graphic form is made for. It is made to bring those things right up to each other, because when you look at these, you know, double page spreads of protest, there's no way I've seen everything in it, right? Like, I've read this a couple times, and I have to, when I read it every time, I'm like, oh, I didn't even see this person last time. But, like, that's part of the scope and power of the narrative, and again, of the graphic form in particular.
Excellent. Yeah, I think maybe, yeah, go ahead, Catherine.
I was just going to say why you feel like this was a good book to be recognized right now.
Oh, like, I don't know, because Eleanor can read the future. Like, when we think about, I mean, police brutality has always existed. The police system is based off of, you know, slave patrols from the antebellum South and the North, to be fair. And so, you know, police, it's problematic. Police brutality has always happened. So there's a certain timelessness to it in investigating that. But it felt so, rereading it now after the 2020 we have had, it feels like scary prescient. Like, what? And you see these clashes and these conversations people are having with themselves in the Heart Tomorrow that Hannah's having with herself around, oh, but I like the funny cop. But then later in the book, the funny cop is the one trying to hurt me. So what is our responsibility when it comes to policing, and how do we think about defunding the police and abolishing the police within a system and a society where not everyone's ready to have that conversation? I'll say, a year ago, I did not think it would be as widespread of a conversation as it is today. So that's interesting. But I mean, gosh, it's like you want to figure out how to live in life right now? Read this book.
As someone who, you know, was organizing the Excellence in Graphic Literature Awards, we didn't get to read any of the books because we wanted to, you know, stay neutral and things like that. So I actually just finally got to read it for the first time a week or two ago. And yeah, having that sense of, oh, wow, like, you know, these issues have always been around, of course, but are so highlighted currently. It felt a little, not creepy or scary, but just like, oh, here we are. Like, we're here. We're, you know.
And I think it speaks to the timelessness of it, like I was saying, of like, there's always been protest. There's always been police brutality as long as the system has existed. And so that's, I think that's what makes it so powerful to read, and about it being set just slightly in the future, right? Like, Mark Zuckerberg is president, and everyone's like, oh no, I remember when he was talking about running for president. Does that mean it's going to happen? And I'm like, Eleanor, don't do that to us. Don't make it happen. I don't know if you have the ability to change the future, but if you do, I'd request not that. But yeah, I think that's what's one of the things too that makes it, I think, so potentially useful in a classroom setting. I think for storytellers to think about the importance of speculative aspects in a realistic work, right? Like, this is set in our world-ish. No one has superpowers. No one's flying through the sky. But it is, you know, it's dystopian, and it's, you know, it's speculative. And so how can we do that in these really careful ways that reflect on the present and on something that exists throughout history in this country in particular? And the other piece I'll say is, like, if you're an activist and a progressive, like, this really shows how those movements are dismantled, and how purposefully they're dismantled by, you know, the police state. And that is, I think it's it's a book again of juxtapositions where it's like there's really sad and like scary things that happen, but it's also deeply hopeful and about birth, and birth is one of the most hopeful things that can happen, and so there's like this new life. And on this reread, I noted that in the dedication, Eleanor talked about how when this was published, she was about to have her baby, and she was like, "Forgive me, and also welcome." And I was just like, that's exactly what the feeling of this book is. It feels like, forgive us and welcome to the good parts. And I'm sorry that we messed up so much.
Well, this might be a good opportunity, Eleanor. I know that you have lots to tell us about the creation of this book. I've got questions, but I want to hear what you have to say before before we jump into those questions.
Awesome. So I guess that I wrote this book kind of thinking that it was a more extreme version of the period that I was writing it in, which was 2017. And now in 2020, not only do a lot of the police brutality and state oppression issues seem to be more like less fantastical than maybe they appeared when I first wrote them, or more consistent. But I didn't at that time anticipate the pandemic, which just makes everything way more complicated and surreal and unjust than things already were. So if anything, it seems like the world of my book is a little bit better than the real world, which is not what you want to have happen when you write a piece of dystopian speculative fiction. Okay, so the next slide, a little introduction, one of the first pages. These are the two main characters in my book, Hannah and Johnny. They've just woken up in the morning. Hannah is saying, "This is my favorite part of you, your eyelashes when the light hits them like that." Hannah has a job as a home health worker, and Johnny is building them a house in the woods. At least he's supposed to be. He's also smoking a lot of weed. The next frame, we can see their homestead, kind of zoomed out. You can see the concrete foundation they've poured where the house is going to be. And while the house gets built, they cook and eat in the trailer and sleep in the back of that old pickup truck. In the next frame, we have Hannah at her day job. She's working with her client, Miss Phyllis. This book is the most personal thing I've ever done, and I put an awful lot of my own life in there. My husband's mom, Lori, got very sick in the fall of 2016, and for the next several years, we spent a lot of time taking care of her. There's a lot of Lori and Miss Phyllis, both very brave people. So this is Miss Phyllis, Hannah's main client. She's drinking Ensure while crying, saying, "My Jack did it right. His heart went and he was gone. My Jack did it right." Next frame is Hannah and her best friend Gabby. They're driving around and stopping to hunt wild mushrooms, singing Mariah Carey. In my older comics, I would try to kind of smooth out the characters, thinking that would tell a clearer story and help readers identify with them. So, make them a little bit more simple, a little bit more everyman. But in this book, I wanted to write about people like me and the kind of people I actually know and am friends with. So queers and weirdos and nerds. And in the next frame, Hannah's an activist. And I had kind of manically thrown myself into activist work after the 2016 election, getting involved with a local progressive grassroots organization, which was very exciting, but also involved just a tremendous amount of endless meetings. So here this is the meeting of HAVE, which is Humans Against All Violence. Des is saying, we had over 200 people show up for the rally yesterday. Not as big as May Day. And Hannah's taking stack. She says, Kiara, then Francis. Kiara says, considering the rain, I think we totally killed it. Next frame is sort of there's a lot of emotional stuff in this book, but it's one of the kind of the emotional pivot of the book. Hannah and Gabby are at a protest at night, and they're the crowd is kettled by riot police. I was trying to capture a dreamlike experience I had being part of a crowd that got kettled at a Black Lives Matter march in Atlanta in 2014. We're marching. Next frame. Marching through the streets and coming out into an open space, and suddenly there are just cops everywhere, totally surrounding you. Frame after that, finally, a big part of the book is that Hannah and Johnny are trying to get pregnant. My husband Drew and I had only decided to try to get pregnant in the winter of 2016, which is a pretty wild time to decide to have a kid. Seemed a little bit more sensible back then than it does now, but so I thumbed out The Hard Tomorrow a year later in the spring of 2017, and I had a miscarriage in the summer of 2018. But then I got pregnant again 4 months later, and it stuck that time. So I finished drawing all the art for this book right at the start of my third trimester, and I got my first copy of the book the day we brought our baby home from the hospital. And then, then my husband's mom, Lori, passed away that same evening in her home in Virginia. My husband was by her side, so it was kind of hard to even wrap your head around. Hard for us to wrap our heads around. Getting our baby at the same time is losing Lori. Here in this panel, Hannah is driving down the street and singing Spice Girls, and is distracted watching a couple with a baby because she hasn't been able to get pregnant. So the next frame, very exciting, and it's just a bunch of text. So I get asked about my process with making comics a lot, and the answer is that it's pretty different for every comic. With The Hard Tomorrow, I wrote out a script of all the dialogue and edited the hell out of it, and then I did about 10 drafts of thumbnails before going to final art. So in this first script, I just sort of was writing out a bunch of dialogue. So, and in the first draft, I have, let's see, where's Gabby at? Hannah says, what? Like I always know where Gabby is? I've got the Gabdar? Yeah, pretty much. Haha, yeah, Gabby can't make it tonight, but their handwriting sucks anyway. Don't tell them I said that. So I can't remember quite, it's hard to remember quite what makes make the edits one does. But next frame, pretty different. Here we have, she's saying, cool haircut, which reminds me, is Gabby gonna make it today? And Hannah says, what, Yunha? Are you saying I always know where Gabby is? I've got Gabdar? She's at the dentist. And then they're just joking around about the different kinds of signs they're going to make for the protest later the next day, I think. So here's a little example of the roughs on the left, which I do on the computer with computer lettering, and then the final art on the right, which is all traditional pen and ink on Bristol, hand lettered. The next panel, first page of the book, and it's a kind of cliche to say, but it's often frustrating to lose the energy of my original thumbnail. So there's a lot of things about the sketches on the left that I like that I wasn't able to bring over to the final art on the right. And the final art took about 10 months to finish, while the thumbs took less than a month, even though I did so many drafts. Next frame. So unlike a lot of my other comics, I spent a really long time on the character designs with this one because I wanted all these people to be individuals, not just symbols. So here's some pictures of final Hannah that appeared in the final book, and then on the right are some sketches I did of her, also digital. Hannah was the hardest to draw, and even after drawing her hundreds of times, I still was never able to keep her on model. I had a really hard time drawing her looking down. I tried as hard as I could to avoid having to have her look down at anything. Next panel is sort of the character design of Johnny, and he was super easy to draw. For some reason, the goofier a character is, the easier they are to draw. You can see in the middle, he's wearing a Joy Division shirt in the sketches, which I'm bummed that I forgot to put in the final book. The next frame is some sketches of Gabby, Hannah's best friend. She's a naturalist, and she's also an activist. She's basically a radical dreamboat. You can see in the sketches that it took me a while to figure Gabby's jawline out. And it was also really important that she and Hannah have extremely different bodies and faces because they both have very similar haircuts. Which is often, as a cartoonist, you lean on the haircut to differentiate characters from one another. But in this case, Hannah copying Gabby's haircut is a big part of the story. Next panel is some sketches of Tyler, who's Johnny's incel survivalist friend. He's a pretty noxious person, but one of the interesting things about drawing I found is that after I've spent a really long time drawing a character, I can't help but love them by the end. But I feel very affectionate towards Tyler now. I got really excited when I realized I could give him giant, gloopy anime eyes. Really feel like rounded out the character. So final frame. So I wanted to write a book that the beginning impetus of the book was, being at my mother-in-law's house for just having gotten the diagnosis that she had Parkinson's, knowing it was going to be really rough. Trump had just gotten elected, which felt, very surprising and shocking to me. And knowing that we wanted to have a kid, not knowing if it was the right thing to do. I just wanted to capture how the world felt to me at that moment, that everything was ending and coming apart all at once, while at the same time everything was continuing on. And now 4 years later, in 2020, the world is ending more than ever, but everything keeps continuing. That's my little process behind the scenes book report. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for sharing with us a little bit about your process and some of the choices that you made for designing the characters.
Yeah, definitely. I've got some questions. I can't wait.
Yeah. So now we would like to open it up to questions. If you would like to put questions in the chat, we can address those here in the stream.
Awesome. And while those are coming in, I have one in particular. What happened with Tyler at the end of the book? And I definitely feel that you left this a little ambiguous on purpose. So I want to push a little, like, because it kind of has the dual, what happened. Was it actually a drone, or was it the bullet that went up and coming back down? And so I didn't know if you, as the creator, I'm sure you have a definite answer in your head, but did you leave that, open on purpose, or what? Tell me about that moment.
Yeah. Thanks for asking about that. That was by far the trickiest part of the book. And I think I flubbed it in that a lot of people that I talked to about it do not think that it might have been a drone. The possibility of it being a drone isn't occur to them, which is really frustrating, because that was my intention, was that it be ambiguous as to whether it was the falling bullet or something more nefarious. And I don't have a definitive answer on that. I think that Johnny doesn't know. And Johnny has a strong motivation that I think anybody could understand, to want to believe that it was a drone, because he wouldn't want it to have been his fault,
Right. Especially after his hesitancy to pick up the gun and everything.
Right. Yeah. So he fired the gun in the air because he wanted to reject violence. So if he was to think that it was his fault that Tyler died, what a horrible thing for anybody, but especially for such a gentle person. But then if he chooses to believe that it's a drone, then what kind of world does he live in now? And what kind of choices is he going to make with that new belief? Because before that, he just thought Tyler was paranoid. So if he starts believing the same things that Tyler believed in, how does that change him as a person?
And the fact that they even had that conversation of, well, if we shoot guns outside, what about the drones? Right. And he has that comment of like, oh, don't be smart with me. I thought that whole moment was just so well done.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, I was interested, before we have some other questions come through, about the choice to make all of Tyler's cats named after Game of Thrones characters.
Well, that's another thing I'm glad that you picked up on. I guess it was important to me. I don't believe in monsters. Tyler is a very different person than me, and he has a lot of beliefs that I find terrifying. The way that he talks about women, the way that he talks about Hannah, his attitude towards violence are things that fill me with intense fear. And when real people, not fictional characters, but when you see them expressed in the world, they're very, very common. So it was important to me to show that even somebody who is really different from me in a lot of ways, and who is really frightening in a lot of ways, is just a normal person. They like the TV shows that everybody likes, and this guy really, really likes cats in a kind of bizarre extent. So just surrounded by cats that he seems to really care for, and
it was such an interesting juxtaposition to the rest of his personality, right?
Yeah.
Cats,
yeah, but that's really important, because I don't think there's anybody in this world that doesn't have that isn't multifaceted, right, to some extent. It doesn't have positive aspects or gentler aspects of their personality.
And I think it would be hard to feel like his ending is so tragic if we didn't see those other aspects of him. There's a real sense of just like, oh man, Tyler. Like, I don't like Tyler. I love that you do, Eleanor. I'm very happy for you. You can like, I don't like Tyler. And so, but I was like, oh no. And I was like so surprised by that feeling. I think because I was so, expecting the death of Miss Phyllis.
Yeah.
But I was so not expecting Tyler to die, and to see that and be like, what?
Yeah.
Oh no, now I'm sad, and I'm sad for the cats. And like, this is sad.
It's interesting as an author. When I first start writing something, the characters aren't real yet. And when I started thinking about Tyler's death, writing Tyler's death, in a lot of ways, it was, I think, an act of revenge on my part. That there are these men out there that are terrorists. They terrorize women, and in so much media, women are the ones who are hurt. The murders of women are a much more, I think, popular thing to have in movies and books, TV. It's titillating for people to see women be hurt. So for me, writing a story about this noxious men's rights activist getting killed by his own weapon felt thrilling in a vengeful way, and which isn't a positive emotion. I don't believe in revenge, but that was the initial feeling. But then I worked with him and I got to know him, and I thought about, why is he living out here by himself? What does he spend all his time doing? And I fell in love with him. So it's an interesting process, and one that feels really healthy to me, because having anger is no good. Not that kind of anger. Sorry, that's a long answer.
No, it's cool to hear where that character comes from, for sure.
So cool.
Thank you.
I do think that kind of showed up as a theme in the book, as of characters that would in certain ways be abhorrent, being humanized in these really intimate ways. And so we have it with Tyler with the cats, and then with how gentle Miss Phyllis is with Hannah, despite the claim that she's anti-Semitic, and as well with the police officer who stops Hannah. So we have these moments with each of those characters, which I think is really beautiful. I wanted to ask about the juxtaposition of pop music in the book, and that the approach of something lighter with a heavier subject matter, and that choice.
Yeah, I included a lot of songs. They're all 90s songs. And I guess to kind of give a little bit of a soundtrack, and a little bit to date Hannah, to those are the kind of the soundtrack of my teens, 90s music, and to keep it lighthearted, because it's not. I think it's really important for fiction to be funny, even if it's really, really serious and sad, because real life is funny, even when it's really, really serious and sad. Real life is weird and strange in a funny, distressing way. And in a book that's about the really hard stuff and the really bad stuff, I don't know, in any sort of work about the bad stuff, that stuff isn't, there's no reason to mourn the tragedies of life if it weren't for the fact that life is can be so beautiful and so wonderful. So if you leave that out of your work, if it's all darkness, then what's there to feel bad about? What's there to care about?
I know when I read it, it definitely came across to me as like, that's those characters. Those are those moments that they get to enjoy, you know, and reach back into a quote unquote simpler time, right? Or a time with not as complicated memories, right? You just want to jam out to the Spice Girls when you're in your car. You may be going to talk to the woman who is dying soon, or you may be going to your protest meeting, but in those in-between moments, you got to let loose and you got to grasp whatever, you know, happiness you can find. And for her, it was, you know, that 90s music. And so I love those moments.
Yeah. And Hannah's a very inherently hopeful person, which I wanted to really get across.
Speaking of that, I was curious, what was the inspiration or why, you know, Hannah, oh my gosh, Gabby. Hannah and Gabby have a very interesting relationship, you know, that other people notice. What was kind of the inspiration between that, or for that relationship?
Well, that's probably too personal to get into. But I think that
I guess what was the importance of showing that relationship the way that you did?
Well, let's see. I guess there's a bunch of different factors. I just wanted to talk about friendship and how powerful that can be, but also I think how confusing it can be and how dangerous. I think especially in queer communities where there's not a strict delineation of the boys like the girls and the boys are friends with the boys and the girls like the boys and they're friends with the girls. There's a lot more room for friendships to become emotionally charged, or even if it's, you know, just in any sort of space where you're trying to have full and deep relationships with somebody that you might also be potentially attracted to. Yeah, so I and although Hannah and Johnny's relationship is, I think, very strong in a lot of ways, there's a lot of stuff that Hannah can't do with Johnny. You know, Johnny's not politically active. He's not an adventurer. You know, he doesn't get out into the world very much. So she has this very precious friendship to her with Gabby, and it just gets too much, and then she loses it. And that's one of the awful tragedies of the book. I think that's maybe the one that feels the most painful to me.
That the moments where she was texting Gabby and wasn't getting replies was so identifiable. There's so many people, and especially, you know, me, I was growing up and discovering my gayness in high school, like, and especially those crushes like that, and maybe if before you even realized that that's what it was, I was like, oof, I feel that.
Yeah, you don't even realize you're crushing yourself until you're destroyed.
Right, yeah. I love that.
Thank you.
I would say that one of my favorite moments of that friendship is early in the book when Johnny says, you would leave me for Gabby. And instead of saying no, Hannah's like, she doesn't date white girls.
Yeah, Hannah's not, wasn't going to reassure him. Rude. not an easy person to be married to.
I also thought as like a narrative choice it leaves something that could have been Hannah saying like, no, I'm straight, like I'm only attracted to men. She answers with like an open door where it's like, let's find out. Like, let's see what happens, buddy. Like, build the house and we can talk. You know, like that's and that felt like we didn't need to have an exact taxonomy of what Hannah's gender and sexuality mean to her, and juxtaposition with Gabby's and Johnny's, and they were just allowed to be like people who were like, I kind of am feeling a thing. Mm-hmm. But okay, is it too much now? It's okay. And as sad as it was, I was kind of also like happy for Gabby that she found a boundary that worked for her. In the backdrop of this like super intense police state moment, right? So it's like which parts are which. But right. I was kind of like, I don't know. I've had a lot of gay friends who have dated straight people and done themselves wrong. And again, not knowing Hannah's identity, I was kind of like, good for you, Gabby. You go get yours,
It was like that was the perfect excuse she needed to be like, no, we got to cut this off.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't. I mean, I'm very sympathetic to Hannah, and I don't think she was doing anything bad on purpose. But
right.
that openness, and like kind of like, well, I'm not going to reassure you to Johnny. I feel like she also was bringing into the space with Gabby in a way that was really unfair to her. Not providing enough clarity about what their relationship was or what it was.
Because Hannah's complicated, because people are complicated, right? Like that's what's so endearing about this work, is you're just like relatable. I have done that terrible thing to someone. Like I wish I hadn't, like whatever it is. Like, and I find that really it makes the work feel so real. It doesn't feel like we're playing with fictional or with toys. It feels like these are real people that could walk in my door at any time because they make bad mistakes, like me.
So I'm curious, and this is a question kind of for Essie and for Eleanor. So 2 parts. Like, Eleanor, what do you want people to walk away from this book with? Like, is there a specific like call to action or a feeling or a anything that you want someone to learn or walk away from? And then backing, once you have a chance to answer that, like you and Essie, since this was nominated for the Excellence in Graphic Literature Awards, which are so education and focused, like, can you see this book being used in an academic setting, whether it's a college class or a high school class or in a library? And what do you think might be a good way to use that?
So I'll go first. I guess that when I write a comic, my goal is to be as clear with my own emotions as I can be, to try to communicate exactly what's on my mind to the reader as much as possible. And part of doing that is that I have to accept that some people are going to respond to it and some people aren't. So I think that what I hope is that for folks who have had similar feelings, they'll see those in the book and feel, I don't know, a sense of release or a sense of recognition, which I personally can find really helpful to feel through art. It's always a blessing when I'm able to feel that way. If there was a larger takeaway, or a smaller takeaway rather, it would be I strongly believe that the folks that hurt us, people who behave monstrously, are not monsters, and it's not helpful to think of them as monsters. I don't think, so there's a police officer that's kind to Hannah in the beginning of the book, and then she's one of the riot police that smashes the protest and smashes Hannah's phone, tries to hit Hannah in the middle of the book. And the fact that she's kind and that she has children doesn't forgive her choice to be brutal. But I don't think that thinking that people who perform acts of brutality are only that, it doesn't give us the tools we need to respond to that brutality and to try to get them to get things to be different. And the same with Tyler. He's a noxious person in many ways, but if we forget that he's a human, then we won't have any ability to figure out how to respond to that noxiousness, how to push against it.
So, yeah, and then piggybacking off of that, so Essie and Eleanor, if we were to use this book in an academic setting, what might be like a way, that a professor or a librarian could kind of lift up this book in a purposeful, intentional way?
I think it's a great example of storytelling that is not, like, what I like about it is it doesn't end in a nice bow. And I think sometimes creators, writers think that that's what stories have to do. And I think it's a great example of how to balance like I was talking about in the beginning, these huge movement moments and these deeply intimate personal moments and what that means. Did I freeze?
No. You're good. We got you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It froze on my end, so I was like, okay.
The wonders of Zoom.
So to me, it's a great way of showing. It's a great way of showing like what what the graphic form can do, and I think that people think of the graphic form when they're first getting into it frequently like comic books, which are like, I love comic books. Great. But, this is another way of thinking about how to use the panel form, how to fill panels in black and white in this illustrated format that isn't as much of that, intense pop art we're used to in comic books. But I also think I think it's a great way to think about how values play into stories. I don't know if I feel like people sometimes forget to think about like what themes am I playing with, and this is like a theme dense work, right? Because there's so much that Eleanor is working with. We've heard these background stories, but also like this is there a binary between good and bad? No, crush that binary. What does it mean to be human, and what does it mean to be a human who maybe was taught beliefs that are false, like an incel or a cop who's beating up a person, or like Johnny in some ways, what does it mean to be taught those things and then have to live in the world? So I think it's character rich, theme rich. The plot is interesting, and for me, it's just like it's a great craft example for anybody who wants to write stories or create graphic works.
Yeah, it's a masterclass in fleshing out characters for sure. Like the fact that I read this book in an hour and a half, right? But like how fully realized these characters are in such a short amount of time. Well, I know we've got a few minutes left, and I think a few people in the chat had a couple of questions. I know we had one from Michael. He says he pays a really great compliment. He says Eleanor is one of our greatest living cartoonists. question, given how you sometimes draw in different art styles or sometimes use color, how did you decide on the visual approach for this book?
Oh, thank you, Michael. That's a very good question. I it's a style that I really like working in, pen and ink, black and white. I had wanted to do a longer piece that was a little bit more sketchy and intuitive for a while, a little less smooth. I guess that instead of sort of in keeping with wanting to have richer, more multifaceted characters, I also wanted to have an art style that was a little bit more rough, a little bit more sketchbooky than some of my art had become. Some of it can get a little like, especially the full color stuff. Yeah, I want it to look kind of punky. You know.
I know during your presentation you had mentioned that you felt like some of the energy had been lost from your thumbs to the finals. How is that different doing your thumbnails from your final, and what do you mean by like how some of that energy may have faded?
God, it's a constant struggle. I don't know how to address it. I'm always going back and forth between doing tighter pencils, looser pencils, no pencils, light boxing, trying to, doing superstitious sort of exercises before I draw each panel. And it's I don't know, drawing is weird because for me at least it's simultaneously just a craft that you sort of hammer away at, and it's kind of magic, kind of mystical. Sometimes the drawings sing and sometimes they don't. It's very frustrating. It's very hard to always get them to do what you want. Thank you, Mike. Oh gosh, that's a really good question. You know what? Let me see if I can find. There's a New Yorker short story. A New Yorker short story by Saeed Saira Piezadeh. I cannot remember what nuts. It's in his collection. And the thing that's really moving to me about that story is it was, boy, I bet it probably came out in like 2007, and it includes immigration issues, the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, global warming, racial tensions, racism, poverty, gentrification, and the fact that it was so short. It was just a short little story, and the fact that he could fit in so much into it was just really moving and amazing to me. I love that story. God damn it! Now I'm trying to Wikipedia finding out the name of it. People. It's in his short story collection, Brief Encounters with the Enemy, which I really recommend. Although that one story is by far my favorite.
Nice. That's cool that you could like kind of take that and build upon it.
Yeah, I found, it's called Paranoia. And it came out, actually in 2011. And boy, it's just a killer short story. I really recommend anybody to read it. But that's a piece of fiction that was very moving to me as far as comics. I don't know if I had a primary inspiration. As far as comics, I really like the work of Gipi. He's an Italian cartoonist, and his books Garage Band and Notes for a War Story are both excellent, sort of complex snapshots of complicated characters. I would recommend anybody.
Nice. And it looks like we got a comment. Someone had said that they didn't hear the question. The audio for the question cut out right before you answered. So Eleanor was just answering the question. Was there an inspiration for the vision of kind of the dystopian future that we saw? So that's what led to that.
Also, the movie 400 Blows was a big inspiration for the ending.
Okay. You say 400 blows?
I don't ever want to. It's 400 blows. I'm always hesitant to check the 400 blows because I always worry that it's actually 300 blows. 400 blows, thank goodness. I said the right number.
Well, I want to thank everyone for being with us today, everyone watching at home, and Essie and Eleanor as well. So now I will ask both of them if they wanted to plug anything before we sign off for the day. Eleanor, is there anything that you wanted to plug?
Yeah, I guess I really deeply believe in the work of the Athens Immigrant Rights Coalition. That's a local immigrant rights group, activist group that I do some volunteer work, and they have if you donate to their civic campaign, which is the support for immigrant families in crisis, all that money directly goes to families that are there's the level of suffering in immigrant communities right now is just unimaginable. So they're doing a lot of food drives and helping folks out with rent when they've lost their job. So if you go to Athens Immigrant Rights, that's a very good group to support.
Thank you.
Yeah. Eleanor, you're so good with yours. I was like, oh, well, my crap I got to talk about. But yes, I would likewise encourage folks to donate to and get involved with your local Black Lives Matter chapter. I'm based in Denver, and Black Lives Matter 5280 is super active and do all kinds of stuff. They've also been doing protests, like they're car-based. So if you're worried about social distancing, there's still the capacity to do that, because I'm very concerned about social distancing. And they all need funds. That, and also if you have a local Abolish ICE chapter, that's another important one to be funding. I will be selfish too, though. Ooh, sorry, Eleanor, I'm not as good as you. But I am co-host of the podcast Bitches on Comics. We talk about whatever cool things are happening in comics. We also answer questions from listeners. So if anybody has anything that they're just like, oh, I don't know how to do this, and we get questions about Tank Girl and Harley Quinn and all that stuff. And then we also talk with comics creators. I'll be emailing you, Eleanor, and on different episodes, which is always a blast. We talk to marginalized creators about what it means to be a comics pro or comics critic in the world of comics. And then also I'm the editor of decodedpride.com. It is an all LGBTQ plus speculative fiction publication, and we would love your support. So thank you for having me. This is so fun.
I just I didn't plug any of my own stuff because I'm feeling embarrassed about not having anything new that I'm working on right now. But you can. This whole thing was a very kind plug for my book. So if people want to go,
Yeah, go out and buy The Hard Tomorrow if
Yes!
you haven't already.
Do it. You're gonna be so happy.
I'm curious. Is there any plans for a digital version in the works, or is it always going to be just hard copy?
I think there is one. I'm not sure.
We'll talk to Drawn and Quarterly.
Yeah, talk to the it's published by Dawn and Quarterly, and if they haven't done that yet, then maybe let them know if it's useful. Make sure to get it at your local bookstore.
There you go. And then I will quickly plug, this has been part of our EGL Summer Book Club series where we've highlighted the young adult and adult winners. This has been fantastic, and we do still have one more for the adult nonfiction winner, which was The Hard Tomorrow. I'm sorry, this is The Hard Tomorrow, excuse me, which was A Fire Story by Brian Fies. And so we'll be talking about that one in 2 weeks. So make sure to join us for that, for another conversation about another amazing book.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for everyone for coming. And I want to remind everyone that Pop Culture Classroom is a nonprofit organization, so we depend on donations. And so after the end of this live stream, there will be a direct link to that.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you. Yay.
Thank you.